Welcome to this episode with Tina Wright, who is one of my amazing clients, and I'm excited to welcome here today her to talk about the impact. In fact, the wording that you've chosen for this, Tina, I love because I talk about it a lot, is health, wealth, and happiness. So we're going to talk about understanding relationships between perfectionism, stress, and physical health, and the cost to your health when it does come to health, wealth, and happiness if you're not managing those. So it's a really interesting topic, one that does play a huge part in business, but in life as well. So before we talk about that, Tina, do you want to introduce who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Danny, for having me on. Really looking forward to this chat because I know that we can chat. So I'm the IBS therapist. I'm an accredited cognitive behavioural psychotherapist, mindfulness teacher, and SERPA trained practitioner, which is the Stress Illness Recovery Practitioner Association training that looks at mind-body issues. And I empower individuals, usually business owners and professionals, to address their stress, to relieve the IBS and regain control of their life and their business, because so often these physical health issues can take over and we're not able to do what we want to do because of that physical health issue, but also the stress that it causes. But the stress leads to physical problems in itself. So we need to address both. And it does have a huge impact on each area of our life, our health, our wealth, if we can't do what we want to do, in our business or in our career, and our happiness. And that's, really where I came to it, was from, my own physical health issues, that I was really frustrated that there weren't opportunities in the NHS to get help. I was working in the NHS, I was offering support to people for their mental health and therapy for mental health conditions, but actually a lot of the physical issues were falling through the gaps because there wasn't a physical protocol, to recover from things like IBS, migraines, or TMJD, tinnitus, and fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, those sorts of things. And I had a hit list of those. I had gained those diagnoses over many years and was frustrated that I couldn't get the help in the organisation that I worked in and loved. And yet there was so much research there to say that these issues could be addressed by using psychology, by using pain psychology specifically, but also neuropsychology and immune psychology and biopsychosocial methods that really get to the core of why we develop those issues in the first place. So I did a lot of my own research, did a lot of my own studying and training, and found that when I put a lot of these things into practice myself, I was able to get to what I would class as recovery, even though most of these things are classed as, lifelong. So I often say to people, just because they tell you it's chronic, it doesn't mean it has to be a life sentence. You can recover from these things. You can find a way of being day to day that stops those symptoms from stopping you. And so that's what I treat or teach to my clients in various ways.
Do you find that there's a link between professionals and, well, high achievers as well in these scenarios where they're faced with these health conditions? And what's interesting is, I bet actually the people that are treating these conditions in like the NHS are also people that are going through it as well.
Yeah, you often find that they are carers or high flyers. I often say they're strivers and perfectionists. They're people that, like myself, had on their what do you call it, report every year from school, conscientious, tries hard, not ever must try harder. It was always tries the hardest, A for effort. Those sort of comments that you think, I'm doing the best I can, I'm pushing myself. And they actually then fuel a lot of this perfectionist belief system that we have to keep striving until we get it absolutely right. And that causes so much stress psychologically, but also on the body. The cortisol release from so much stress on a daily basis, because we're having these thoughts daily. I must do better, I must try harder, I must get a new client this week, or I've got this deadline to meet, I mustn't miss that deadline, I've got a meeting, I mustn't be late for the meeting. That's a big one for people, worrying about being late for things. And that adds so much stress, because every time we have that thought, it's going to release another little bit of cortisol into the bloodstream, which will increase our inflammation, which is a driver for so many physical health problems. So yeah, there's a huge link between our health, our wealth, and our happiness. Because you're not going to be happy, are you, if you're constantly struggling with a physical health issue? You're not going to be happy if you're constantly trying to get to that next goal. And that's one thing I often tell people: forget your goals. And I know that goes against what you'd say, Danny, but I often think about setting intentions. It would be great if I could get to that at the end of the week. I'd like to have achieved this. But if we say should, it's
that's
so
when
much
it causes
pressure.
that, with the stress and the pressure, doesn't it? And I knew it's ironic, because I had a friend who is in business, but she talked about her weight loss journey, and not in the way that you expect with the diets. I mean, she did all the diets and stuff, but she weren't losing it. It was only when she worked on that connection with her mind, and actually she learned about inflammatory foods, and I'll share what she taught me actually in this, through research herself, like you did. And she lost weight, but not through a diet, not through exercise. Obviously, she did make tweaks and stuff, but it was actually through this scientific, I guess, research that she came across, and genuinely being happier, which then resulted in her weight loss and improving her health as well. And she actually helped me discover. So I knew at that point that I already had IBS, and I started researching and making changes myself. And actually, to this day, I don't really suffer with it anymore. But when I was first told I was pregnant, when I found out, and you can't have tablets then if you're pregnant. So I was just told to basically just suffer. And when the pregnancy's done, I can then take medication, which I didn't want to do. So I'm like, no. And then I was told I was going to struggle with it for life now by the doctor and my family. And I was like, oh no. So I did look it up, and I just changed certain foods will trigger it. Stress triggers it as well. Every time I'm nervous, I call it nervous poos. That still happens now and again, but it's very rare now because I know how to manage it. But this woman, when I met her, she got me thinking about tolerances and how our body tolerates foods. So I actually paid for a test, and it's just about, what's it called, biochemistry or something like that. And I found out that I am lactose intolerant and apparently allergic to cabbage, but I've never had issues with cabbage. But obviously something must go on in the body for that to show. And it's made a massive difference in implementing that. But when you were talking then, it made me think, when does all of this cycle actually begin? When does the perfectionism and the stress from that, when do you think that begins? Because thinking back to my own childhood, and I was the Cleverclog's oldest sibling, and I think that's probably where I became perfectionist. I also am a Virgo, and we are known for it, but can it start as early as childhood?
Oh, it starts even before birth. We're listening, we're hearing our adults around us, our parents talking. So it actually starts from learning to worry. Worry is the thing that we do to try and problem solve. It's the thing that we start doing with our thoughts to try and take control of things, to try and relieve the fear of uncertainty. So if you think about all the times that you've ever been anxious, it's usually because there's a certain element of uncertainty. And as a child, as a baby, everything's uncertain, it's all new, which is why babies and children and us as adults, but we forget it, like routine. it's why so many people who are neurodiverse like routine, because it relieves a lot of that uncertainty. We know what's coming. We know what to expect. We know what's happened before. But if you're in a household maybe, or you're listening in from the womb and you can hear there's maybe conflict within the household, or there's a lot of activity and constant activity, and it doesn't feel safe in some way, you start to learn that the world's not great. It could be uncertain, it could be dangerous in some way. And then as a child, we take on those beliefs or those thoughts as well, because we see maybe an adult close to us, often a parent, who is also worrying, is also perfectionist, is also trying to get things right so that they feel in control, so that they're not being judged as wrong, as that, so that other people can see them getting it right.
Yeah.
And we just subliminally soak it all up as children, as sponges. We're learning constantly. Our brain is developing so quickly that these neuro connections are being created so early on, and they get repeated so often throughout life. They're reinforced, and they are then the stronger links in the brain than, say, thinking, oh, I'll do it later, or oh, it doesn't matter if I'm late, or the alternatives to perfectionist thinking. So it does start early, usually from learning from others, usually from our thought processes, and trying to take control of an uncertain world, which is quite natural.
Quite interesting you say that, because of my 3 children, the one that suffers with anxiety and is neurodiverse actually is the one that, when I was pregnant, I started struggling with lower feelings and went into postnatal depression as he was born. So it's quite interesting that he's the one that's, and sometimes I think we blame ourselves, but actually, if there was that in that moment, looking back at, like, for many parents, if there's the support or the knowledge of this, the awareness, then it will make a difference, and it breaks the cycle for future generations.
Exactly. I can totally relate to that. I had postnatal depression, which was why I went into the mental health field. I went on a mission and spent years at uni trying to work out, why me? Why did I get it? I was the life and soul. Why did I get depressed? And my son has diagnoses of ADHD, ASD, and dyspraxia. So, and he was told he had dyslexia as well, but never officially diagnosed. But we think it probably is right.
Hand in hand, don't they? Usually.
Oh, so often. It's they call it the triad, of neurodiversity, don't they? It's usually all of them, or at least, one and a bit of one of the others. So, I actually think that they are very often an extreme form of an anxiety disorder.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Because go on. Sorry.
It's just that, like I was on about it to my husband recently, actually, it's just about the neurons in the brain, isn't it? And what we've perceived, and how then they, I guess, connect together, that then present this. Obviously, I'm no expert, but like the condition that we then are, which is, I believe, for me, ADHD, perfectionism ties hand in hand, anxiety and depression. And I actually believe, I think can't say it, dyscalculia. I think that's what I am.
Dyscalculus, dyscalculus as well,
So, and that'd be my triad. And then I look, but I think that all of us have a pick and mix of some of them. But it is really interesting to see where it actually comes from. And I think I get so interested in this. I really do.
I know, this is it. I do. And I spend hours reading up on it all. And then I'd say one thing, and then I was going to go off on a slight divert, but it's because we're often told we're a born worrier, or we're always being perfectionist. We take it on as a label, as if it's us.
Yeah, and it's
this
not.
Is the key thing. It's not you. It's not your fault. You didn't ask to be born at that time, into that family, into this culture, these surroundings. It is not. It is just that what happened, and you were trying to survive the best you could. and you continue to try and survive the best you know from previous experience. But if you change those experiences, change what you know, you can change how you act.
Yeah.
And that's the premise of CBT is, you know, like if you change what you think and believe, you can change what you do, and that will change how you feel physically and emotionally. And I think that's the thing is that, you know, you can trace this back in families, you know, like PND, you know, postnatal depression, you often see it running in families. Perfectionism, worry, anxiety, ADHD, ASD, you'll see it running in families, but it's not because it's genetic, because the genes are so intertwined. There's not one gene that will tell you any specific characteristic of anybody. It's because you live in the same household or have been around those people when your brain was
That's
formed the most.
nature versus nurture debate, isn't it? Kind of comes up there.
Yeah.
How does that then? So we've talked a lot about like around the perfectionism stress, and obviously that a lot of that can relate to the mind, but how does it actually impact your physical health? Because obviously what you help your clients with is because of that. I'm guessing they come to you with like, this is my physical like symptoms, this is what's happening, and obviously there's a mind and body part there. So how does it actually present physically for them or for
Yeah.
those situations?
So although I focus on IBS now and have specialised in IBS, I do, you know, help people with all kinds of mind body stress illnesses. You know, I'll label them as stress illnesses, illnesses that are caused or made worse by stress. There's also another name that they were given back in the 60s and 70s by Dr. John Sarno in the US, and he called it tension myositis syndrome, which was tension of the nerves. You know, and actually, you know, that makes sense a lot of the time, because if you think about it, if you get anxious, what happens in your body? If you're stressed, you're thinking about you're going to be late for something, you know, not even anything major, you know, you're going to be late having a chat with Danny, you know, I'm going to be a couple of weeks late, oh no. We start worrying. So we have these thoughts. Our body then goes into it's not the full flight mode, because it's not fear that we're experiencing. It's not that we're going to die in that situation. It's not a life-threatening situation, but we go into a perceived anxiety response. We're perceiving that there's going to be some form of threat, so some form of judgment.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then we then have a physical reaction to that. And to get us prepared to maybe, you know, run away or to fight, you know, if they tell us, you know, you're late, what are you doing? You know, you were meant to be here 5 minutes ago. To get us ready to defend ourselves, our body needs to have stronger muscles. So we inhale a lot more oxygen than we actually need in that moment. And we'll overbreathe. We'll start panting, or, you know, increase our breathing rate and speed. Rate and speed, that's the same, but increase the amount of oxygen we're taking in. That oxygen is then going to the heart, through the blood. The heart starts pumping a lot harder to get that blood and that, you know, to take that oxygen to the big muscles in the arms and the legs to be able to run away if they tell you, you know, well, I'm not talking to you now, or to fight if they start saying, why are you late? You know, well, I was on the bus and it's broke down, you know, we can get all arsey, you know, but that's our way of fighting these days. It's usually verbally. It can be physical, but because we're then not expressing or really expelling all this extra oxygen that's in the body, it sits there. It causes continuous tension.
And it's not in the right place then, is it? When it isn't. And this is why I can see now how mindfulness techniques and breath work, meditation and things like that to slow you down, but also take the oxygen into the right place in your body can have an impact.
So from a physiological side, it's going to the big muscles. So we get tense, we'll get lots of headaches. We might get tense in our stomach and our pelvic area, because that's tensing up. The whole of the gut and digestive system will be shutting down if we're in that response as well. because we're not going to be eating if we're running away from someone or fighting them. So it starts to shut down, and we might hear gurgling, we might feel tension, we might feel it, like where food is. It tries to expel anything in the gut, the stomach.
Used to happen to me when I was a teenager, when we had exams. I didn't mind exams, but there must have been something there, because as soon as we sat there with a pen to paper in a silent room, did my stomach start making those bubbling noises, and I used to be like, oh,
I know. And it's actually a medical, diagnosable mental health condition where we get so concerned about our gurgling in our stomach. And that then prevents us from doing anything, like going out socially, or, having meetings online where it might be picked up. So actually, these things are normal reactions to your mind, your thoughts in that situation, but we misinterpret them. We start to think that that means there's something wrong. If we're aware that our stomach goes into a clench, when we're nervous, or, even if we've not noticed that we're nervous, which is often the case, because we're not always aware in the moment, which is where mindfulness comes in again, becoming aware of your thoughts, becoming aware of your body. And, I do a lot of body embracing, like what are we feeling, noticing what is going on at each time you're having different thoughts. And then we'll misinterpret that as something wrong, something bad, something, I'm going to need the toilet, I'm not going to make it in time, which is another thought, which will
and then it builds.
More cortisol, increasing us, our breathing rate, but the cortisol then releases more frequently, and when we're in that cycle of worrying, the cortisol stays in the system longer. It turns off the endorphins in the brain, which are our pain response. It increases our visceral hypersensitivity, so we feel more through our nerves because we're not getting this dampened pain response coming through. And so we then feel the pain that's going on in our stomach. So not only is it clenching, we're feeling that pain that goes, oh no, we need the toilet.
What would you say is the best advice you could give somebody to kind of interrupt that pattern if we're having it happen a lot, or to break the cycle? What would be your best that?
So we can break the cycle from a number of different ways. One is through the thoughts, and learning how to interrupt the worry cycle, which is something I teach my individual clients. I've actually got a course coming up to do that, teaching a specific cognitive behavioural psychotherapy technique that is being devised and proven to work to reduce the amount of worrying we do, which clears the headspace. And I recommend it for everybody, because when I learned this 15 years ago, it changed my world. I taught it to my son as soon as he was able to learn, what to do, and was able to write, because you do need to have to, you do write with it. But if you're not looking at the thoughts, breathing exercises, nice long deep breaths as soon as you notice your breathing has changed. And I'm over breathing a bit at the moment, but I will go outside and go play with the dog afterwards. I'll be running around chasing the dog around to get rid of that before my next meeting, because I know that if I don't, after the next meeting, I could end up tense, I could have tummy, I could have my head hurting, anything. But it's down to us over breathing. So slowing our breathing down, but it has to be a nice deep breath down into the solar plexus, so that you're activating the vagal nerve. That's the long wandering nerve that goes from the brain right through to the guts. It goes through to every vital organ on the way. So if we get to the bottom of that and expand slowly and allow it to release slowly, so longer out breath than in breath, because if we're running, that's not how we're breathing. If we're fighting, that's not what we're doing. We're breathing short, we're breathing quickly. If there's a risk, we're breathing quickly. So it's a message to the brain, oh, we must be safe. We're able to breathe slow. So the brain then goes, turn off the cortisol response, turn off the over breathing, stand down, nothing to worry about here. Start, go back to what you were doing before. So really taking control of that, and it might take 3, 4, 5 breaths maybe, to slow things down. If you notice it speeding up again, just a few more. But what we don't want to do is focus on it for too long. And we need to make sure we're exhaling a longer breath than in breath. Otherwise, we get an imbalance of our of our carbon dioxide and oxygen. So making sure that we do that, and then returning to something really mindful, trying to be in the moment. It doesn't mean we have to meditate, because meditation is different to mindfulness, one of those things that get confused sometimes. But actually just noticing that, what I do is noticing the temperature of the different keys on the keyboard. I can tell where my A and my S are, because they're the most frequent ones, keys that I use, because they're warmer than the others. You can, just take a minute to look outside and...
I'm feeling my keyboard now.
Sorry?
And some parts are, I'm just feeling my keyboard now, and some parts are warmer than the others.
Yeah. You just notice those things that you wouldn't normally notice. I look outside and see how many different shades of green I can see, because at this time of year it's wonderful. Springtime in the UK, it goes from really bright green to really dark, intense, and some bluey greens and things, and it's just like being in that moment, using your senses. Again, if you're in this moment, you can't be in the future thinking, I'm going to be late, I'm going to need the toilet, what if I eat something that plays up my tummy? We're in this moment, and you're turning off that cortisol response, you're turning off the stress, you're turning off the over-breathing, just by being here.
If we want to learn more, because there's so much more you could share, I know this.
Yeah.
So when I learn more and we want to find out about your upcoming course, how can we find you and follow you and get in touch with what you're doing?
So I post daily, almost daily, on Instagram, and I'm at Evolve with Tina on Instagram. I've also got a free Facebook group that I facilitate for IBS sufferers, where I share a meditation every Monday evening live, and we have a question and answer session on a Thursday, and I drop some top tips and keep up to date with the research. So that's Evolve. Sorry, not Evolve. That's the IBS Empowerment Circle on Facebook. And, I think you're able to put the links below.
I will do, yeah. They'll be all there for everyone to see.
If you've got any questions, just DM me on any social media channel. I'm on them all. I don't actively engage with them all, but you will find me as Evolve with Tina. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Amazing, thank you so much. And there's just one final question I've got to ask that I ask all my guests, because it relates to what I do. What would be your best tip for being organised in your business?
Do your DMOs each morning, get them out of the way. So those daily, daily tasks that you might put off because they are so small sometimes, like they feel small, they feel insignificant on their own, like engaging in different Facebook groups or on Instagram, or replying to emails is on my daily things, because I often put them off and think, oh, I'll do that later, because I want to be writing this blog, or I want to be talking to someone straight away. So it's getting them done, and then you've achieved so much that day, even if the rest of the day you don't feel great or there's something else happen. You've sorted the main sustaining spine of your business. Is that a good way? It's supporting your business.
I always say it's the tasks that are going to bring in new leads, nurture your current audience, and sell more. But also, that's the daily stuff for me. But I also have monthly, weekly, quarterly, yearly ones, because there is tasks in our business that we need to do, like tax return every year, pay the tax every year, pay the national insurance every year, and then things like bookkeeping I do monthly, and things like that happen regularly, that are not every day, and like you say, sustains the running of the business. So if anyone doesn't know what DMO is, it stands for daily method of operation, but I also have the, like I say, weekly, monthly, and so on. Thank you so much, Tina. This has been so good.
That's okay.
Talk about.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Definitely go check out Tina on social media. She gives so much value, as she's just told us, especially in that Facebook group. Go over and head over and have a look, because you'll get a lot of support. And I know that this can help a lot of people who are struggling with kind of perfectionism, stress, and in relation to their physical and mental health as well. So definitely go and check her out. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny.